have some individuals, Shannon and Cheryl, joining us, and so we can certainly start with introductions. If Shannon, you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. I think I know just about everybody here already, but my name is Shannon Giacovino. I'm the new BUDS person for the Department of Developmental Services. And I think after we do introductions, I'll talk a little bit about what I do and how I can work with people. Is that good?
That's perfect. Thank you. And Dr. Ellis?
Hi, I'm Cheryl Ellis. I'm the new Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I will, after introductions, speak a little bit more about our goals and vision.
Great, thank you. So this is Kathleen.
Can you hear us?
Yes. I don't know who said that, but yes, I could hear you.
I can't hear you.
So this is Kathleen Hayes. I am the chair of the North
Region
Council. If you are in the meeting, you're not speaking. If you could please just mute yourself. We are getting some conversation from other individuals.
I can't hear anything.
I might need to put that in the chat because it sounds like they can't hear us.
Text.
This is Lisa Lardo, and I
don't have my phone.
remember myself in case it's easier to call in, and that might help with the audio.
Okay. Okay, so why don't we go around? There are a lot of people here this evening, which is a great turnout. Let me see if I can find the attendance list and we can just go down, and everybody, if you would just very briefly, because we do have so many people, introduce yourself, that would be great. Let's see, my participant list is loading. Okay, great. So let's start. Annette, would you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself? Okay. Donna, would you introduce yourself? We can go back to Annette.
Hi, I'm Donna Cohen, and apparently I'm a ghost tonight. I don't know how to make my camera work for some reason, but I can hear everyone, and happy to be here. I'm the mom of a 29-year-old daughter with autism and an intellectual disability.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Donna Clausen?
Hi, I'm Donna Clausen. I am the mother of Dawn, who is supported by the agency, and she is 37 years old and works at Seaward.
Thank you. Kim?
Yes.
So Kim Little says that she has no audio. Oh,
you did?
we can hear you, Kim. Yeah, she's going to log off and log back on.
All right. Very good. So I think next we have Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Sandora, and I am a parent of a young woman who has intellectual disabilities. She's 31 and she's in a CRS in West Hartford.
Thank you. Melissa Barr Cruz.
Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa. I am a mother of 3 boys, 18, who has diagnosed with ADHD, who's currently in Porter and Chester. I have a 15-year-old son who has multiple disabilities, who's in 8th grade. And then I also have a son that's 13 that is in 7th grade, and he is diagnosed with ADHD.
Thank you, Melissa, and welcome. I know you're a guest this evening, so thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Claudia?
Hi, Claudia Newman. I'm Executive Secretary for the North Region.
Yeah. And it's Normal Lomonico. Okay, we can go back. Oh, yep, here we are.
Hi,
Hello.
I'm Norma LaMonaco.
I have a son who has Down syndrome. He's 40 years old and is supported by the department. And we're trying to get him into his own place right now using IHS because the CRS has been CRS programs have been stopped for a while until May, as I understand it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Rick Rothstein.
It's gonna take me a while.
I'm Rick Rothstein. I'm the parent of a 39-year-old son who lives in a CLA in West Hartford. He's been in a CLA for 32 years. And I think we should invite Shannon every month because we get a good crowd when she's here.
Tammy.
I'm Tammy Sellinger, and I'm the mom of 2 adults with Fragile X syndrome. My daughter Jody is 31 and lives at home with us, and my son Brian is 28 and he lives in a CLA in West Hartford.
Thank you. And I think Susan Luchek Hughes is having some difficulty, but I see you there, Susan. Can you hear me? Nope, doesn't seem so we can go back to Susan. Elisa.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Elisa Velardo. I'm the Regional Director for DDS North Region. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. And we'll go back to Annette if you are able to introduce yourself. Annette is the vice chair of our Regional Advisory Council, so I can introduce her.
I'm going to text Annette and just see if she can hear.
Okay, great. All right, and we had some other people join. Let's see if I can, let's go back down through the list. If I missed you, can you please introduce yourself now? And we might have a few people introducing themselves.
Hi, this is Kim and Ellen Little. Can you hear us?
Oh, yes, great.
Great, because we are on the phone, but we're also on the computer, but we can only hear you through our phone.
Okay, well, we can hear you through the computer also, just so you know. So
crazy.
I know.
We can't hear you at all, so other than the phone.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you were able to get through on the audio.
Can someone put in the audio, the phone number, because Susan is having issues as well.
This is Elisa. I can put it in again.
Thank you.
Okay, and I see Adriana Ramirez joined. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Adriana Ramirez joining.
Okay, thank you, Adriana. And I think I saw Crystal Sacco as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm Crystal Sacco. Sorry about the internet difficulties. Teams is not my most familiar. I am the Northern and Southern Regional Coordinator for CTFSN, and I also have a 21-year-old son with nonverbal level 3 autism.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that hasn't had the opportunity to introduce themselves? Okay. Very good. So at this point, I think we will, I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback myself. Can you please just everybody mute if you're not speaking?
Okay.
Okay. So Claudia circulated the minutes from last meeting. So for those people that are members of the Regional Advisory Council, does anybody have any questions or comments as to those minutes? Okay. Seeing none, and somebody is, I think, sharing their screen right now. I'm not sure if that's intentional. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to
This
approve
is
the
Donna
minutes.
Cohen. I'll make them. Oh,
Donna, thank you for the motion. Can someone second, please?
I second it.
Thank you. It does have to be a member of the council.
Okay.
Oh, Lori, did you second it?
Yes, I said yes.
Perfect. Okay, great. All right. So given that we're virtual, does anybody oppose the minutes? Okay, great. So the minutes are now deemed approved. Thank you. And I know that in the agenda, we have a couple of items, a legislative update. I know we have guests that will be speaking. Elisa, what do you think the best order is to proceed?
This is Elisa. I think probably guests and then legislative updates. I did want to let you know Josh Galora is going to be able to join us, but he couldn't join us until 6:30. And so we will have him joining us toward the end of the meeting to talk about housing options.
Great. Okay. So wonderful. So I know we have Dr. Ellis and Shannon Giacovino. I don't know if either one of you has a preference as to who speaks first, but I certainly give you the floor.
You can go ahead first, Cheryl, if you want.
I can go. Thank you, Shannon. So as I mentioned, I am the new Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And the agency has a strong commitment to ensuring that everyone has a voice at the table. So I am charged with making sure that our diverse staff, our diverse individuals we support and their families are heard, that they are seen, and that their voices are included in the general work and practice that we do. So we're creating a culture where diversity is celebrated, diversity is talked about, and that we make sure that we are providing service that encompasses everyone's cultural backgrounds, their linguistic backgrounds, their ability to participate in community affairs. So one of the things that I've started is something within the agency called Coffee Conversations. We will be having our first one, I believe it's next week. And it's really right now just started with staff, and it's an opportunity to dialogue about what we as an organization need to do to make sure that we're listening, that we're learning, and that we're being inclusive to everyone within the organization, within our communities. So that's really my focus. I'm very new to DDS. I come from the world of DMIS, which is very different. But I started my work as a child psychologist, working in a number of organizations, including Catholic Charities, the Village for Families and Children, working with individuals who had trauma history, behavioral concerns, had difficulty at school in the community, and then moved into adults with mental health concerns, substance abuse and addiction, and am now kind of full circle, again, working with a population dear to my heart, which are individuals with ID and DD. So kind of full circle for me. I'm a psychologist by trade and just enjoy what I do. I enjoy working with people, learning from people, learning about people, and sharing whatever my experience may bring to the table that may be helpful. So thank you for having me this evening.
Thank you so much for joining us. So as Dr. Ellis mentioned, she's the new Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Does anyone have any questions for her about her work? I do have a question. I'm wondering, is there any sort of formal plan that you've laid out, or just in your own mind, do you have goals that, let's say, in the next 12 months you'd like to see achieved in the areas of DE&I?
Yes, so I have actually drafted a strategic plan. And in that plan, it's really right now just kind of a year, and I'm laying out the action steps. The first is to develop a committee and just really figure out what our mission is, what our vision is as a DEI organization, and what do we need to do to make sure that we are being inclusive. So I'm trying to formulate all the players and learn all the players at this point. So my first meeting is with the leadership group so that I know who to invite to the table. And that is kind of my first step.
Thank you.
Let me in shortly.
Normal, do you have a question? If so, you can unmute yourself and ask it.
I have a question about the, you mentioned the coffee conversations that are happening with staff right now. Will they be only with staff?
The first one will be only with staff, and then I will open it up as I learn the system and learn who the connections are and how to outreach. Unfortunately, because I am so new, I've been, my start date was December 31st. And so I am very new, so I'm just learning all the players and who to invite and how to contact people. So I will be opening everything up in terms of our dialogues, our trainings, to everyone involved, to all of our stakeholders, all of our community, as soon as I have the opportunity and the know-how.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This is Kathleen Hayes. Yes, Donna Cohen.
Hi, so first, welcome. And thank you for what you're doing. I think it's wonderful and necessary. I'm just going to share two of my own experiences real quickly. One, so we're a Jewish family. And so one is at the day program. They always decorate for Christmas. So, well, I mean, she hasn't been a day program since 2020, but the last time she was there, I said, do you mind if I just bring in like a Hanukkah thing to put up on the wall too? And they were fine about it, but it would just be lovely if that was sort of a natural thing to do. And I think there's other holidays also around that time. So maybe, you know, we could do all the holidays. And then the other interesting thing that happened is I had joined a different committee, and they scheduled one of the meetings on like a major Jewish holiday. There's a lot of Jewish holidays, like a gazillion of them, but there's like three major ones, let's say. And that one did surprise me. But I was new to the committee, so I just said, hey, I can't be there because of the holiday. And I kind of hoped they would like say, oh, gee, maybe we should reschedule, but they didn't. So anyway, maybe just that sort of thing. Also, not, you know, there's a lot of stuff I'm sure that you have to do on your plate, but I'm just tossing that out.
No, thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Ellis? All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we all really appreciate it and all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll hand the floor over to Shannon.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Giacovino. I know a lot of people here. I don't know all of you. I hope to get to know all of you at some point. I am the new ombudsperson for the Department of Developmental Services. I started in the middle of November. Some of you know me from my role previously as the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy for the ARC Connecticut. And a lot of what I'm doing in this job is very similar to the work that we all did together previously. When people encounter an issue or a problem while they're, navigating the system, people can reach out to me, and they often do. My job is to reach out, to be a neutral party, and to try to see if we can find the path forward. And so I know that my predecessor really focused heavily on that role of, taking complaints and issues and reaching out to the regions and reaching out to DDS to try to resolve those complaints and issues. And so that's a big part of the job. But another part of the job that I'd like to expand upon is really working closely with DDS, with families, with other stakeholders, with self-advocates, legislators, on, promoting promoting policies and promoting issues that, are going to help people with IDD to have better lives in the community, and for them to get better, more person-centered supports. There's a lot of initiatives happening within the agency, so I've been fortunate to be able to sit on some committees with some of the families who are in this room right now. I also hope to work closely with the Council on Developmental Services, whose responsibility it is to work with the commissioner on, improving services and improving supports. Sorry, but that's pretty much it. I have to report once a month to the Council on Developmental Services on what I have been doing. Those are public meetings. There's a meeting this Thursday at 4:30, I believe. Anybody can attend those meetings. Anybody can give me or any member of the council. Rick Rothstein is here. He's on the council. Any kind of feedback or information that you think is important for us to know, to bring back to the commissioner and to work with the agency on resolving any issues that people face. Does anybody have any questions?
This is Kathleen Hayes. I do have a question. I'm wondering, certainly understanding that your work with individuals is anonymous, but can you give a general sense as to the types, some examples of the types of complaints that might come forward that would be appropriate for you to handle?
Mm-hmm. So, I've so far dealt with a variety of issues. There's been issues around family members having problems advocating for their loved ones with private providers. I think everybody knows that the system is under tremendous strain right now. And in more than one instance, families have encountered problems with providers when they've been advocating for their loved ones. And so people have reached out to me about that. There's also been issues with family members who are not guardians, who have had problems getting information about their loved ones, problems seeing their loved ones. I'm trying to think of some of the other issues that I'm dealing with right now. I've gotten issues from people who live in programs who are feeling frustrated, feeling like their voices aren't being heard, and looking to have more control and more say in what happens in their lives. I think really any kind of issue that a person has that, for some reason they haven't been able to work out with their, through working with their case manager or working with people in the region, they should bring that issue to me. And, I've encountered nothing but an openness from really everyone within DDS to try to work those things out. Often it's just a matter of getting the right people in the room at the time to sort of figure out what the path forward is. So it's really easy, I think, for there to be miscommunication, or for there to be a perception that there's a problem when often there's not. It's just a matter of getting that conversation going and figuring out what the path forward is. And so, there's nothing that someone should hesitate to bring to my attention if they feel that they need to talk to me. And I'll put my contact information in the chat, and I'll put a link to the ombudsperson's, my place on the DDS website. And so please share my name, share my information. I want to hear from people if they're struggling at all.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Shannon? Elisa, yes.
Shannon, I'm just wondering if you could put the link to the meeting on Thursday in the chat as well. Thanks.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
And I can say from the regional perspective, it's been really it's been a really positive process. The range of issues that sometimes come to the ombudsperson really does vary, but we have been pretty successful in working together to resolve those issues. And sometimes they come from external. We've had communication from hospitals or external entities, and once that conversation starts, then it gives us the opportunity to really resolve the issue.
So I'm having a hard time finding a link for the meeting on Thursday, but I can get that to Elisa and Kathleen to share with the group. Okay.
This is Elisa. If you give it to Claudia, she'll make sure she distributes it.
Will do.
This is Norma Lamonaco. I was wondering, I know you spoke about bringing issues to the private providers, and would staffing issues also be a part of that, in terms of families not being able to find staff, or agencies not being able to find staff, I should say?
So I would say that that is an issue that everyone is very well aware of. I would say at this point, families need to bring that issue to their legislators. The legislature went into session last week. I know that the ARC is planning on having a virtual family hearing day this year. I would encourage everybody to attend that. And I think that you have to let lawmakers know, how that's impacting your loved ones. I know there are programs that aren't fully open yet. I know that there are vacancies in group homes right now that can't be filled because providers don't have the staff to provide the supports. I've been in this world for over 30 years now, and we always say it's worse than we've ever seen it before. But the reality is that I don't think I've ever seen the system in this much crisis, and it's impacting every provider and every family that I know.
Okay. Thank you.
Rick, you have a question?
I have a couple of comments. First, the agenda hasn't been finalized yet for tomorrow. So as soon as Kevin, the chairman, signs off on that, it'll get posted, I'm sure by tonight. The other thing I would say is we are very fortunate to have the positions that we have in our department. We have a council that is made up of citizens, families from the community. We have the RACs, the three regions, and we have an ombuds person. And we are very fortunate to have all of those because not all states have such a system, and it's really a brick wall between um, the consumers and their families and the departments. So we're very fortunate. We have a commissioner who's very open to discussion, and we in the region we have an excellent regional director. And I will say, as someone who's had a son in the system residential for 32 years, this is definitely, I will second what Shannon said, this is definitely the worst it's ever been. And I think we're all determined in this group and at the council and to work to make things better. And it's not going to happen overnight, but there are a lot of ideas out there and we just need to move forward with them. So, and we're glad to have Shannon as a member of the council, just very glad to have a person of Shannon's caliber and experience on the team with us.
Thanks, Rick. And I agree 100%. I feel like we are very fortunate in this community to really be a community. Things aren't perfect. But I think that more than any other state agency, DDS is very open to working with all stakeholders. And this is a problem that our community faces right now. And so I think we have to work through this together.
Thank you, Shannon. Does anyone else have any other questions? Well, thank you, Shannon, and thank you for everything you're doing. I know it's sorely needed, and we're really happy to have you at the helm.
Thank you.
Okay, so next on our agenda, I believe, oh, Annette, did you just raise your hand?
I did, sorry. I just wanted to say also thank you, Shannon. I couldn't introduce myself before. I'm Annette. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you're doing, Shannon. We really appreciate it.
Great. So I think next on our agenda, we have the legislative update. As Shannon mentioned, the legislative session started last Thursday. I believe it was the 9th. Rick, you're generally our resident legislative guru. Are there some comments or impressions that you would like to share with the group?
At this point, there isn't much to share. For those who are waiting for services from the autism waiver, the governor has proposed adding 150 slots to the autism waiver program, which will be a blessing because the waiting list is many years long, and it's not an expensive program, but it's just been very hard to get the slots authorized. We'll have to see how that goes through the budget process. Providers are disappointed that there wasn't a cost of living increase or any adjustment to rates in the governor's proposed budget. But this is the first part of the legislative session where we start with the governor's budget, then the legislature comes up with its own budget. We'll be having hearings in the legislature in a few weeks in the Appropriations Committee that will be virtual, that people can sign up to testify on issues that ring true to them. And certainly while there have been increases in funding over the last few years, we are dealing with a labor situation that is very difficult. People are now making approximately $16.75 an hour to start in the private sector, but many of them can go to work at McDonald's for $20 an hour or Starbucks. So there is a lot of pressure to improve recruitment and retention by increasing compensation, and it will be up to the voices of all of us and the providers to impress upon legislators that thank you for what you've done, but we need to do more. We also still have a waiting list, a residential waiting list. And there are openings in many of our programs now because of COVID. It's much more difficult to fill slots right now because you really have to match the person to the program. And so you may have a group home with 1 or 2 openings and the provider would like to fill them, but you have 3 or 4 people that are already there and the person or persons coming in have to be compatible with the existing program. So that's really all I have to say at this point. I am nursing a mild case of pneumonia, so I will leave it at that. I think we'll get out to everyone the dates of the appropriations hearing. It's usually on a Friday night. That's just kind of the way it works out for DDS and other health agencies. So I'll be sure to share it and then we'll get it around to everyone. Glad to see everybody there virtually.
Thank you, Rick. I hope you feel better. This is Kathleen Hayes. I have not been following the bills coming out every day, though I did happen to look at them on Tuesday, and I saw that there was a bill that was proposed relative to, I believe it was some sort of income tax deduction for individuals in Connecticut that contribute to an ABLE account. So again, that will go through if it has to be called for a public hearing, and then there would be an opportunity to submit either written or public testimony. So I'm in the elder law section of the bar, and we do have a lobbyist that helps us to track legislation. So I asked her to include that one in the legislation that we track, and certainly I can provide updates on that and any other pertinent bills that might be on my radar. Does anyone have any other comments regarding legislative issues? Okay, great. So I think, Elisa, we're ready for your update.
All right. This is Elisa Velardo. A few items. I just am gonna pull up the minutes from last meeting. I just want to provide updates to items that we talked about last month. The NCI National Core Indicators project continues. We have been busy getting surveyors trained up in this virtual climate. The training is more extensive because we need to train people not only on the survey tool itself and the process, but also on how to connect with people virtually if that's their preference. But we do have our first batch of surveyors that have been trained, and outreach should be beginning at as of this week. And so if you have a loved one that's been selected, you can expect that there will be outreach in the near future. The next thing I had on my list has already been referred to a number of times, and that's that there is a continued strain on our system, and that staffing issue continues to be just very pervasive. So the good news since last we met is that the COVID numbers have gone down, really dramatically gone down. This week I get a weekly report and there have been no new cases in the region this week. This is the first week in quite some time where there have been no new cases reported. That's really good news. And I wish that that decrease in the positivity rate correlated with an increase in staffing, and it has not yet at this point appeared to. And so I think we're hearing just from every stakeholder that this is an issue that is impacting their lives. So if it's families that self-direct, we're getting calls that they're not able to hire staff. If they lose one of their staff, they very quickly can go into crisis. Providers, certainly in every area, are experiencing the same. We've met with providers. We have a monthly provider meeting. And in the last provider meeting, staffing issues and the strain on the system was really the dominant conversation. So we met after that meeting with a group of providers through the Alliance to really look at what we might be able to do to support providers, because literally the conversation was, we have executive directors that are passing meds and driving people to day program, and HR people that are covering shifts, and clinicians that are out there. It's really a all hands on deck kind of a situation. So a memo went out today. One of the questions was, can we have some flexibility around retraining? So the annual refreshers, and we are extending the time frame for annual refreshers. And it's a 90-day extension. And basically what providers were saying is the people that do the training are covering shifts. And if it's a matter of a staff person going to training or being in a direct support capacity where they're needed, safety comes first. And so they need to be in that direct support capacity. So we were able to grant that extension. The two exceptions are CPR certification and PMT certification beyond the 18-month period that we already have in place. And so I'm hoping that'll be well received. That extension will be granted from February 16th, which is today, through May 31st. New employees. And so what providers were saying was, hey, we understand that new employees need to go through training. And so their focus was on that recertification. But for new employees, we did extend new employee training from 30 days of hire to 45 days, with the caveat that the new employee would not be able to work alone until they've completed required training. And so we're really trying to balance some flexibility to allow providers and family members that self-hire the ability to focus on the support needs without compromising safety or quality. Licensing has been on hold, and that hold will extend through March, and then in-person licensing will continue, will resume, and the same for QSR. For our case management, where in-person visits have been suspended as of February 28th, in-person visits will resume. Family and individual always have the ability, if they're not comfortable with an in-person visit, to request a virtual meeting or visit, and we'll accommodate that. But we do have families and individuals that are requesting in-person visits, and so that'll resume as of the 28th. We have a team that's looking at medication administration as well. There is a inter-agency task force that's been in place for quite some time that's looked at consistency in terms of med administration. This is DCF, DMIS, DDS that have worked together with some of our providers as well. Dr. Val Bagby-Young has been a really principal participant on behalf of DDS, and so they are now piloting this new medication administration training that does have an online component, which hopefully is helpful. I know getting into med classes, and again, if there's a coverage issue, that has at times prevented staff from getting to a class. This new pilot has the virtual component. The testing will still be in person at this point in time, but they're exploring the feasibility of online testing as well. The practical part of med administration, the pass and pour, that will continue to be in person with a nurse. But the coursework will be available on a virtual platform. And so hopefully that's helpful. I know providers are really very excited about that. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do to accommodate the issues and prioritize staffing being available to individuals. Nursing is a real issue as well. So direct support staff for sure. And I think a number of you alluded to the fact that, you know, this has been an ongoing issue for many years. We've talked about the staffing crisis. But I think we are at a point where we have a cumulative effect to the fact that we've been a workforce that's been under strain for quite some time, and then we had COVID, where you know, people left the workforce and have not all come back, and then right now outside of our industry there's a workforce issue, and so there's competition with other industries because you know, unemployment is low, and really it's, you know, for a potential applicant they have a number of options. We definitely are seeing that in the nursing arena. There are a lot of benefits to being a nurse in our service system. It really is in so many ways a position that offers quality of professional life and the ability to work with people over time, and that really works for some people. But in terms of compensation, compensation for nurses has just gone up dramatically. And so that has really put a strain on our service system. So we're looking at that as well. So that's it on the staffing issue. I did want to let you know, as the numbers have gone down with positivity, we're resuming services. So last month I shared that respite had been placed on pause. We are resuming respite as of February 24th, which is not this weekend, but next weekend. We were able to obtain a number of rapid test kits, and so we'll have those available for guests. We'll ask the guests test within 24 hours of coming to respite. If they don't have a test available to them, we have tests that will be made available to them within the 24-hour period, and hopefully that puts people at ease that you know, as they're resuming respite, that it's that we're doing as much as possible to ensure everyone's safety. And I know that that's we're all really excited to have respite up and running. I know that that's one really key tangible support that families that may not have any other services are able to access. And when it's painful when we have to put respite on pause. And so I know that there's been a commitment to get a respite reopened as soon as possible. Let's see what else I have. I reported in on the remote support, the pilot project. And so we're meeting with those agencies on a weekly basis. Those two agencies are Mid-State ARC and the ARC of Eastern Connecticut. Both have identified 10 people that that are living in their own apartments or are moving into their own apartments that they had identified could benefit from enabling technology. We met with one of the agencies, Midstate, today, and 5 people are in place. Now, 4 of those people were already in their own apartment with a lot of technology, and so they're developing some tools to really monitor just how they're utilizing technology. They're assessing if there's additional technology that may be beneficial. But the whole focus is really on supporting people to be as independent as possible. One individual newly moved into an apartment, and so they shared that they, met with the individual and family members, and that's brand new. We'll through the course of the pilot be receiving updates in terms of how that individual does. And with the second agency, ARC of Eastern Connecticut, I think the 10 people they've identified will all be fairly new to enabling technology. And the 2 agencies are working really closely together. So the policies that they're putting in place, the forms that they're putting in place, they're sharing those resources. Additionally, DDS has a remote support work group that meets weekly. And we're developing tools that our case management staff will have available to them. We have a group of remote support champions across the state that meet on a regular basis, review all of the materials that we've put together to make sure that they're user-friendly, accessible to families, clear. The terminology with remote supports can be new to people, so we're really working to make sure that it's as clear as possible. And then we'll be sharing some success stories. And so I thought I would offer that I can, in future meetings, share success stories. They're usually little videos, 3 to 5 minutes. And just so that you can see some of the people who have moved into their own apartments or homes or in whatever setting they choose, and the types of technology that they're utilizing. We also, I think I mentioned, have 89 DDS staff that are going through training through SHIFT. It's training on assistive technology, and there are 3 tracks. One is kind of an orientation to assistive technology. That's by far the majority of staff are going through that assistive technology credentialing program, and it's really an overview of assistive technology. They use the term enabling technology because it's not meant to monitor or watch over people. It's really meant to empower and enable people. There's also the ETIS, which is focused on service coordination. It's the Enabling Technology Integration Specialist. So we have, that would be for kind of the case management track. And then we also have the leadership series. And I can say that I am about halfway through the leadership series, and it's excellent. I thought, because we're meeting weekly and talking about how technology can be utilized in Connecticut, thought I was pretty well versed, but it really is excellent in terms of strategically where do we want to go. And I think that's a piece of the staffing issue. It's not the solution to the staffing issue, but it's certainly a piece of the puzzle. And so I'm excited that that's moving forward in Connecticut. See if I wanted to mention we're currently going through a review with OIG. This happens every so often. And so right now the focus is on critical incident reporting and abuse and neglect reporting. And so within the regions, we've been reviewing all critical incidents that have occurred. Right now we're looking at 2020 to just look at the incident, the follow-up, to ensure the follow-up was appropriate, reviewing the definition with our staff and with providers, because what tends to happen is something's serious, for sure it's serious, but it doesn't meet the definition of critical incident, but it gets submitted as a critical incident. So we're really refining our process to ensure that people understand the definition, and when they're submitting something as a critical incident and truly is a critical incident, then conversely, what can happen is something meets the definition and it gets submitted as an incident, but it's not identified as a critical incident. So we've been working a lot with our providers, with our internal staff, to make sure that people are well aware of that definition and that the appropriate follow-up occurs when a critical incident occurs. That's about, I mean, I can share with you, I know that this group had asked if we could have Amber Burke join us. She is going to join us for our March meeting. And so we will talk about employment and the supported employment leadership network that Connecticut is a part of. We have that on the agenda for March. I didn't have any other particular updates. Are there questions that people have for me?
I'm sure there are questions.
So I'm well aware that Josh Galore is not able to join us until 6:30, so we have about 30 minutes for questions. Or we can take a break and then we can come back.
Normal, do you have a question?
Just want to be make sure I'm clear with the assistive technology. You mentioned wanting to empower individuals, people with daily living or etc. I'm not sure what avenue that you're all talking about. And it seems like you did mention that it's really not it's not something that'll take away from staffing individuals to staff someone. And because I think people will need staffing. It'll be hard for some folks with some kind of technology. I'm not saying no technology, but to continue on the recruiting staff members is has been a pretty serious problem.
Yeah, I think no, it's not meant to. And as we're looking at this pilot, the expectation is not that it takes away from staffing. What we talk about is the hope that over time, those staff may be able to support more people. So you'd still have the staff. And I'll speak about remote support specifically, and then we'll talk more broadly about assistive technology. So with remote supports, the way that it works is the person generally is a person that has IHS services. uh, uh, individualized home supports. And so they are not in a 24-hour CLA or a CRS. In fact, while people in a CLA or a CRS can utilize technology, and some of them do utilize similar technology, it would not be considered remote supports. Remote supports, we can't provide two waiver services at the same time. And so if somebody's already getting a 24-hour service, then they would not receive remote supports. So it's somebody that's in their apartment, they have less than 24-hour supports generally. And what the remote supports does is allows through technology and a remote support provider, it allows them to have contact during the times when their direct support staff are not there. And so depending on the technology, and each person's home is set up around their particular routines and what makes sense for them. But there's usually a series of sensors, you know, so that time is spent up front getting to know the person and what their routines are. If I get home from work at 3 o'clock, then you can expect that the door should open sometime around 3 o'clock. If it gets to be 3:15 and that door hasn't opened, then there'd be an alert because Elisa hasn't arrived home yet. Same with, I know one of the things that for people who have diabetes, that there's been great success with is just a sensor on the toilet that allows, if somebody's urinating frequently, that's an indicator that perhaps their blood sugar levels need to be monitored. It can be sensors on the refrigerator. It can be sensors on the door to make sure that you know, people aren't coming at odd hours. There's whole bunch of other technology that can be put in place. One of the worries is, you know, if somebody is cooking and they leave the stove on, there's technology where it's an automatic stove turn off. Certainly the MedMinder is something that's incredibly liberating because there are reminders. I think I've shared in this meeting, I used a MedMinder with my dad as he aged, because there's reminders that are in place for the person. And if that door doesn't open, if those meds aren't taken, then an alert can go to either a natural support, so it can be to a family member, or to a remote support provider who can then just check in. There's one of the criteria is that there's two-way communication with a visual component. And so it may be that they call the person or they check in with technology, Skype, FaceTime, whatever the technology is, but there's a video component so they can see one another. If something serious should happen, there is an emergency, they also have the ability to contact emergency services personnel. And one of the safeguards that's built right into remote supports is there needs to be somebody that's available to respond if an in-person response is needed. And so when remote supports are set up, there's a plan that's put in place. And so there are identified backups. And so if, you know, if somebody, the power goes out and all of a sudden the technology is not working, the remote support provider is not able to connect to the person, there's got to be somebody that's available to go and respond in person. So that's remote supports. And then there's assistive technology that's used, so widely. And we can have a presentation on assistive technology, but that's just every single day expanding. I've had families that have family members with extreme behavioral challenges that have used assistive technology to create a safe home environment. And one mom who contacted us because her son would just electrical cords were a real concern, and so everything had to be really safeguarded, and it was really a challenge to set up the home in a natural home-like way because they were so concerned that he would bite through an electrical cord and that it could seriously injure him. And through a combination of environmental modifications and assistive technology, he's now able to be in the home set up for the whole household. They're able to do some voice activated technology that is working really well for him. And so when there's a request that comes in for a need is identified, we have a couple of different agencies that we work with that have staff that have been trained in assistive technology, and they can conduct an assistive technology assessment, and then they'll recommend specific to the individual what they think would be helpful. Communication's another area where technology has been just incredibly helpful. There's technology now that that actually for people who have difficulty speaking, if a person has cerebral palsy, may have some speech impediments, technology that is able to learn their speech patterns and what they've said so that it's clear. And then there's all of the technology that you and I use. There's I won't say her name out loud or she'll start talking, but the Alexa and smart plugs so that really the whole house can be activated as a smart home, and that's being used quite a bit as well. You might recall that it was a year ago in January, we did a number of grants, assistive technology grants, and people were able to submit for grant funding that would allow them to utilize technology, either software, sometimes it's just an app, and their iPad that is helpful, that allows somebody to benefit more greatly. Some utilize the grants for internet connectivity, and that's still a real big issue. Not everybody has Wi-Fi, not everybody has access to the internet, and most technology requires that. There is some funding that's just become available. This has been really a national issue. And there is some technology that's become available to make Wi-Fi more affordable. And then, of course, the actual hardware. So whether that be, an iPad, a lot of people requested tablets and that kind of technology. But we're right at the 1 year mark. And so we'll be checking in to see what that technology has resulted in 1 year later. Lori, did you have your hand up?
Yes, hi, it's Lori Sandora. Alyssa, I have a couple of questions on the, called it enabling technology training, and you had 89 people trained.
We have 89 people within DDS, and then the provider agencies. We have 3 provider agencies, the 2 that are participating in the pilot. All of the staff that will be working with those folks that will be receiving remote support, they're also going through this training. And then we have 1 additional agency that is training up their staff because they have 1 person that is utilizing remote supports and will be. So even though they're not part of the pilot, we wanted to make sure that their staff were trained up and proficient in the technology.
Okay, as far as your frontline folks, the case managers, are they well versed with what some of the options are? Like, say, for instance, I have some families that I work with at self-direct or are looking at self-directing, and that would be a nice adjunct to some of the families that might be self-directing with community first choice. Who would they talk with? I mean, would that be a conversation they'd have with the case manager, and then the case manager would refer them to one of those agencies that would do an assessment?
So we have two people within the region, Amy Blazowski and Patricia Simbola, who are actually statewide leads in assistive technology. We're really, really lucky. One of the things that we talked about, I'd say probably about 6 months ago, is how do we make sure that no matter where you are in DDS, you have access to someone who's knowledgeable in assistive technology. And so all of our case managers, if they get a question about technology, they can contact Amy or Patricia. And even in the other regions, if there are questions about technology, they contact Amy or Patricia. But that's two people within a very large organization. Then we have this remote support work group, which started with about 10 people. Our Deputy Commissioner, Peter Mason, is the lead. And then I facilitate the meetings. But we have participants from across the state, and they're participants from case management, leadership, resource administration, because resource needs to understand how technology gets paid for and work with the agencies, or our PRAT teams around technology approvals. And what we finally landed on, the assistive technology work group has expanded quite a bit. So now we have probably 20 people that from across the state that meet on a weekly basis. And then Wayne Seidel, who is our director of case management, you know Wayne.
Yeah, I know Wayne.
Oversees case management statewide. He has a group of AT remote support champions, and they're meeting now. They're case managers by and large, but there are also people from resource management as well, and they're going much more deeply into all of the materials. And our goal there was that all of these champions would be experts. So in every office across the state, there should be somebody who is really immersed in Connecticut assistive technology, working with Wayne, aware of the materials, able to guide. Some of the materials are really an initial meeting with families. How can, is remote supports right for me? And a series of questions that you would just kind of go through, kind of the first conversation. And if you come away from that conversation, and yes, the person's interested and the team thinks this is a good option, then we have a tool that goes more in depth, where we really kind of look at what the person's needs are. And really, it's more of an assessment that then there's typically a company that actually will set up the assistive technology. They in order to do that, they need that comprehensive information. And so we have now these champions across the state who have been working with Wayne and our assistive technology point people are also part of that group. And so now they're at a higher level of knowledge. And then the next wave was this shift enabling technology training. And that is impacting, we have clinicians, nursing staff, OTs, PTs, people from our public division, Southbury, people from Southbury are participating, people at central office, people in our business office, people in our ops center, people from our waiver unit, so that our goal is that everybody throughout the department should really have an understanding of the potential of assistive technology, so that when a question comes up, if they don't know the answer, they have somebody that they can go to, and nobody's shutting down the conversation saying, no, 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 we don't do that, because we do, and we're having a lot of success with it.
I have one more question. When it comes to a funding standpoint, is say a family wants to look into self-directing and they're using funding, how does that technology piece enter into that? Does that come from the department that's separate from their waivered money?
So, no, assistive technology is a waivered service. They would start with their case manager, the broker, who would look. Sometimes technology is so inexpensive. Sometimes, and I mean, I think when we think of technology, we think of kind of the glitzy bells and whistles, but you know, a tablet maybe $50. And so they'll look at what the need is, whether it can be accommodated within their budget, because, you know, they can utilize funds within their budget. And if it can't be accommodated, if the need can't be accommodated within their budget, then there's a process where they can request the funding.
Okay, thank you.
And that's for families that are self-directing, as well as people who are receiving services through a provider. If technology would be is recommended for an individual, then there's a mechanism that they can get an approval for technology.
Okay, that's great information. Thank you.
You're welcome. Norma? You're still meeting.
I know it's so new, you know, it's new, you're all working on it. Who would the request go to?
I would start with your case manager.
Yeah. And then
actually, if your son is already supported by a provider, you can talk with the case manager. You can also talk with the provider, because a lot of providers are just incorporating technology within the services that they provide. If it's something that not everything requires an assessment, some things are just pretty much common sense. But if it's something that's more specialized, if it's around communication or an adaptation to a wheelchair or something like that, then the case manager would put in a request for an assessment, and that would they can do put in a request through that.
When you mentioned communication, understanding the person better, how could that help?
Technology, it's certainly worth exploring.
Okay, thank you.
Shannon?
So are there some types of assistive technology, like I'm thinking of communication devices for a person who recently someone reached out to me. His son was nonverbal. He communicated partly with American Sign Language, but partly with his own sign language. And the dad and a caregiver who had been involved with him since he was like 3 both knew his signs. But because there's been such turnover, especially in the past year, he was having, the new staff coming on just couldn't understand him. And so obviously he was having a lot of difficulties. And so is something like that regular Medicaid would pay for? Are there some kinds of technology that are related, to people's disability that regular Medicaid would fund?
Perhaps. I'm getting a little feedback.
Oh, sorry.
Perhaps That would be well worth checking into, but I think in that case, that might be a case where an assistive technology assessment might be helpful. Because there are different options. I was just, I'm certainly not an expert in communication technology. I was just in a meeting before this meeting, and it was Connecticut is part of a consortium of 18 states across the country that share resources around technology. It's pretty amazing what's happening across the nation, and so and people can raise, questions to the group, and there was a similar question, a person with low vision that was also hearing impaired, and so that makes it even more challenging because some of the strategies for people who are hearing impaired rely on visual cues. I think in that case, Shannon, maybe an AT assessment might be helpful. And in that case, depending on the region, you would start with the case manager, and they could reach out to Amy or Patricia, who can guide them in the right direction. We also we also within the department, we have speech and language staff, we have OT-PT staff, so there might be a discussion in terms of, is this a speech language, is this something that the speech language therapist might have some ideas about, or maybe it's something that truly technology is the solution.
Yeah, this was in another region, and I was able to work with the assistant regional director but there seemed to be some question about how things would get funded. And the dad was willing to pay, but if you add the, the amount of hours that the assessment might cover, and, I mean, it could have been, I just wanted to kind of be prepared in case it wasn't something that the family could afford, that we knew how it would get funded. And the region is working with them, so, they're all set, but I was wondering about that. Thanks.
As far as your question around whether Medicaid would cover it, depending on what is recommended, I think. So some assistive technology absolutely is covered, and it depends on what's ultimately recommended, I think.
Hi, it's Lori Sandora. I wanted to just comment a moment about the assistive technology, the evaluation. I recently had an evaluation done for my daughter for a device, an output device, and that was completely covered by her Medicaid. We've had devices before through the public school system, but it was antiquated, and I wanted to have an assessment as of the last couple of years, and she had an assessment at the hospital for special care, where we tried a few different devices, and the device was completely paid for by Medicaid, and follow-up training was also covered under Medicaid. So I wanted to share that with you because I never knew that was a covered expense myself.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
And can I ask Lori, who did the follow-up training?
The Hospital for Special Care, their speech and language pathologist. She assessed Kathleen over a couple of visits, determined which type of assistive tech output talking device would best meet her needs. We tried a couple. I suggested one, and then she had a couple that she wanted to try. We tried those. Oh gosh, we worked with her maybe 3 months, once a week. And then our doctor had to write a referral for the necessity of the device. The device was $7,000. It was very costly. But it's something that, you know, can be thrown across the room and it wouldn't break. But it was completely paid for. I mean, there was a lot of red tape. It took maybe 4 or 5 months. In the meantime, we met bi-weekly, worked on the device. I think she gave us a loaner. When we did get our device, she worked with me as far as programming it, and she did some in-service with the staff at my daughter's group home. So I was really pleased. I really didn't know that was something that would be covered. I thought, you know, I had to put in a request to the department, but found that out and went that route. So I just wanted to mention that.
That's great information. Thank you for sharing that. And I will share that as well. When you mentioned a loaner, we do have an assistive technology steering committee, and it's comprised of people from across the state, private providers. We do have representatives from Tech Act, Neat Marketplace, Easter Seals, all of those leaders in technology. Certainly, Midstate ARC is a participant. And one of the discussion points is the fact that all of these entities have lending libraries for technology. But depending on who you reach out to, there's no way that the repository of all the information is integrated. So you'd have to call Tech Act, call Neat Marketplace. And so we're working together to see if there's any way that we can just compile that information. And it's challenging logistically because everybody uses a different platform, but it's exciting to know that there are resources out there that people can try, because one of the biggest things with technology is it looks like it's going to work. And we've all done this, you know, myself. Something looks like it's going to be great, and then I try it a couple times and it doesn't work, and then it just kind of sits. And with assistive technology, certainly something that's $7,000, you want to be really, really sure that that's going to work. And so
that's right.
These lending libraries are a really good way for people to try out equipment, make sure it's going to work for them before they invest.
And talking to the case manager first, and she would refer you to either Amy or Patricia.
Yeah. If the case, some of our case managers are very knowledgeable, but if they have questions that they're just not certain of, they can reach out to Amy or Patricia, and they're great resources in the region.
Okay. And you could get an initial assessment if that's what they think.
If it seems like that makes sense. Not everyone requires a full assessment, but if they think that would be helpful, yeah, they could guide you through the process.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I just saw a face pop up. Josh Galora, have you joined us?
Hi, I am here. Nice to see you.
Very good to see you. So I will turn it back over to Kathleen.
Thank you, and welcome, Josh. We're very pleased to have you, and I will turn the floor over to you to introduce yourself and share some guidance with us.
All right, thanks so much. If anyone has trouble hearing me, or if I'm not clear, just please let me know. My name's Josh Galora, and some of you may know me. I work at DDS as the Director of Business Intelligence and Analytics. So what does that have to do with housing? Could have a lot to do with housing in terms of how we might measure performance or look at what outcomes we might want to see with people that enter supportive housing. But before I entered this role, I was in a different role at DDS doing organizational development, and I was asked to attend an interagency committee on supportive housing meeting. And that committee has been around for almost 30 years. We were late joiners, and they invited us to join. It was very nice. And they really were looking to expand membership to include all health and human service organizations, including Veterans Affairs and Corrections. And they already had Department of Social Services, Mental Health and Addiction Services, and Children and Family, Office of Policy and Management, as well as CHFA, who's the Housing Finance Authority for Connecticut, and the Department of Housing. So this is kind of a model that's emergent and is present in many states across the country. It's a very beneficial model to Connecticut, where you have housing finance organizations partnered with development organizations and the social service orgs that need the affordable supportive units. And that's the climate that we have in Connecticut. That group was working to oversee special funds that were authorized through the Office of Policy and Management, and they were managing housing developments. And that model kind of shifted to something else. And DDS was able to get involved in supportive housing. So the development of new supportive housing units through a program called IDASH that some of you may have heard of. And IDASH was a program that set aside funds for development dollars to build supportive units within affordable housing developments. So those IDASH developments were already going to get some tax credits from Department of Housing. They were already, these developers were building a building. They were planning on including affordable units there. And they were able to partner with DDS providers to develop really very integrated supportive housing units within those developments. And again, that's called IDASH. And there was a set aside bucket of money for that. And that has already been expended. And there were 3 developments that as the result of IDASH. And I'm just going to kind of give you an overview of the projects. Is this level of detail good for folks? Is it too much information? No one's saying yes, it's too much information. So I'm going to give a little bit more of an overview of what we have in place. So DDS has 7 approved supportive housing developments, 3 of which are constructed and 4 of which are in various states of construction or planning to be constructed. And then we have 3 pending approval, and I'll give you a brief overview of those. We have 3 developments that came about as a result of that IDASH program. And that program was our pilot program, you can think of it as, where we were given some set aside funds and told to develop a model of supportive housing that was affordable and more sustainable than say group home development. So we had our funders, the Office of Policy and Management, very interested in DDS exploring other models of supports and enhancing our ability to support more people, and maybe do that also at a lower cost with better outcomes. And they're very involved in supportive housing development because they fund all of that through for the homeless population, and they've seen what Housing Plus supports can do for a population. So they believed in it, and they thought that that might work for the DDS folks. And so we were able to get 3 different projects developed through IDASH. One is in Canton, one just, and that opened, last year. And then one is in Hartford, it just opened. And there's another one in Bloomfield that's opening very soon. DDS wanted to continue to develop these options for people because we learned a lot through the IDASH program, and we were also able to leverage the things that DDS wanted to accomplish, our mission and vision, and really pair that with the goals of supportive housing, which the Department of Housing was promoting, which they're very copacetic with one another and really about being integrated, having affordability, clean, safe place to live, the same things that we all want, access to transportation and employment, really maximizing choice and connection with community, and going from that message about like limitations and people have to be in a certain setting because of these limitations to really exploring possibilities and competencies that people could develop to live in this environment where they wanted to live, where they had more freedom and more control over their lives. So we wanted to continue with that. And what we were able to do through our membership with the Interagency Committee on Supportive Housing, one of the things that committee does is it oversees the Supportive Services Plan, which is involved with low-income housing credits. So GDS has been able to have some sustainability. What we do now is there's something called low-income housing tax credits, or people in the housing industry, they just call it LIHTC. And what that means is developers go to the state and ask for money to build affordable units. So many of the big billboard type developments that you see all around you are tax credit projects. And that means that they would need to include some units that are affordable. So they can be a mix of market rate and affordable units. And what we're trying to do is get a toehold in there to get some of those units set aside for DDS individuals, like we were able to do with the IDASH project and program. We're able to continue to do that through this low-income housing tax credit project. So every year, many developers submit a request to Department of Housing for these tax credits. It's a standardized application process, and it's very involved. If they want to get some additional points, they can partner with the DDS provider and put forth a support services plan. They would work with the region where the development is supposed to be to identify the need for the development, if the feasibility, the availability of resources. And if it seemed like a good match and like it was something that the region wanted to move forward with and the developer and provider were a good match with one another, they can enter into an agreement and submit an application to the Department of Housing for low-income housing tax credits. And as part of that process, they would be asking for some extra points because they're including these set-aside units for support services for DDS. And they could partner with other organizations as well. For instance, they could set aside units for DCF, family reunification. They could set aside units for homeless veterans. But in this case, they're not. They're setting aside units for DDS. And they are looking to get some tax credits from the state of Connecticut for the affordability component. They're looking to get a little bit of extra points from including these supportive units. And that's really what DDS has been doing in terms of trying to grow our ability to increase supportive housing options for individuals. It's not a fast growth. So to give you an idea of the numbers of units that we're talking about, in some of these units, you know, we're talking about like 11 units supporting 17 people, you know, 12 units supporting 12 people, 6 units supporting 7 people. So it's not, you know, we're not talking about 25 people. We put some limitations on this that said we didn't want it to be any more than 25% of the total size of the development. And There's an incredible amount of work that the regions do with the providers in anticipation of opening, and that could include a lot of consultation, encouragement around using assistive technology and all the tools that are involved in AT, the planning process of how they're going to operate the setting. Once that they're in there, the planning process of just finding referrals is quite extensive and involved. As you can imagine, with housing developments, the opening date is a moving target, and so it's tough to line things up, and then sometimes things get delayed. We haven't seen anything come in under time. It's always a little bit over time. But that's kind of a brief overview. DDS also provides rental assistance to many people who live in their own apartments, who live in clustered apartment settings, and who are supported by providers, supported by their own staff, private hire staff, et cetera. So there's so many different options there with in-home supports and apartment living, independent living, but this is the one that I'm involved in. Basically, my involvement is I provide some information at an information session for developers that the Department of Housing hosts every year for developers who are interested in the tax credits. And then they can hear about DDS and the folks that we support there. Oftentimes they will then go out and look for providers in their area to partner with. They may contact their local municipality or something like that to match up with a provider, or they may already have a match in mind as well. You know, that's really what my involvement is. And then I work with the teams that work on the development over the course of time. And I'll just kind of look to Elisa. Lisa, do you think that there's anything else that I can share that would be helpful for the group?
No, I think that gives a good overview. We've been fortunate in that the first 3 developments are all in the North region. So Josh and I work really closely together, and I value your expertise on the housing end of things. And it's as each of the initial IDASH developments has progressed, we've learned a ton. And so as we're moving into the low income tax credit supported housing developments, I think IDASH did exactly what it was designed to do. It really introduced us to all of the stages. There's a lot of coordination that goes on right through the development of the housing, as well as all of the coordination as people meet one another, if it's a roommate situation. And so there's close collaboration with the developer, the provider, and the department. And so it's really met a need that it seems to work for a number of people.
I wanted to say that if there are questions that folks aren't able to get answered tonight, if Elisa can get me any questions, I'll be happy to respond, and that can get shared with the group. I saw one comment about, are there any plans for developments east of the river? And I haven't seen any as of yet. And that was our goal that we were hoping with IDASH, is that we would get a development in every region. And as it turned out, we got 3 developments in one region with IDASH. They're not all in the same exact location within that region, but definitely geographic diversity is something that we are working towards. I would say that we got a development in Torrington that was answered a call because there really wasn't much out in that area in the west. There's a couple of things in the New Haven area, Orange, and East Ridge, I think. And I know that there's something in New London, but I haven't heard of anything yet east of the river. That's something, let's see. Is there anything that we can do to encourage it in our area? That's a great question. And I'll have to think about that a little bit.
And I can respond that I think it's certainly a need that's been identified. I think those of you who are interested in that, and a number of folks on the RAC, I think clearly we have a need for that type of housing east of the river.
Yeah, I think one thing that is important is this match between a developer and a provider. And so that's, you know, I think that that's an important thing. So I don't know who does that, but I know that when that happens, and sometimes that is families that are involved in those processes because they have loved ones who are supported by a provider. They want that provider, providers in following or a program such as this. And sometimes that it might just mean talking to the people that you are already working with and seeing what their plans are and encouraging them to pursue something like this in the future. DDS doesn't have there's not a large capacity for this. It's kind of, it looks to me like a slow growth thing where you could add maybe 30 or so units supporting people every single year. Maybe not quite that many, but in that range of maybe, you know, 20 or 30 units every single year. But right now we don't have the funding to go beyond what we've already committed to. And we're looking at how do we request funds that we'll need in 4 years? That's a challenge because of the budgeting cycle. We are working ahead, looking at projections of when future developments will open so that we can map out a strategy for requesting the funds we would need in the time frame that we would need them. It's not something that we're used to in terms of the prospective budgeting with these moving targets, with these housing developments. But it's not a huge amount of funding that we're talking about. It's just that we need to plan for the rental assistance. Those use the RAPs, which are the standard rental assistance program certificate that the state of Connecticut uses. So it's different than DDS rent subsidy when you go into one of these supportive housing units. The rental assistance certificates managed through the Department of Housing. The person typically pays 1/3 of their assets and income that they have monthly towards the rental expenses. And then the state pays the other portion through their agent, which is called John D. Amelia or JDA. But JDA manages all RAP in Section 8 for the state of Connecticut. So Section 8 is housing subsidy funds that are federal, and RAPs are state housing subsidy funds. And these ones are different in that the housing subsidy is tied to the unit itself. So usually we tie a subsidy to a person, and that's how DDS thinks. Like we have portability of resources, which is unique in some states, but it's been kind of a cornerstone for Connecticut where we assign funds to people and that then they are able to, through their planning process, use the funds within the cost standards and allowable things that you can do with it, but they can purchase services. So if you don't like who's supporting you, theoretically, you could purchase those supports from somebody else. But in this case, this rental assistance is tied to the unit itself for a term of 15 years. And that's part of this housing tax credit process and the way that the funding works, the way that they have to guarantee to have supportive, affordable units in those units for that period of time to get the tax credits. And we have to agree and commit that we're going to commit those rental resources. So just some more things to think about how the whole thing works. I know it's a lot. I tried to not overcomplicate it too much, but I appreciate your time and talking with you. And please feel free to reach out through Elisa to me with any questions that you have. I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Josh, I just do have one more question. You were talking about the important work of kind of grand scale development and kind of these big projects. I do special needs planning, and I work with a lot of individual families and clients that aren't necessarily, may not even have DDS funding, aren't necessarily linked with a provider for residential services, and they're looking at housing solutions. Do you have any sort of guidance or recommendations as to how these families can access potentially some DDS resources if they're looking to put together their own development? I know in the past people have talked about, you know, in DDS, I think was more open to in the past, creating a CRS that a family might sell their home to DDS. And I don't think that's really the case anymore, but any guidance you have regarding individual families that either themselves or with a pool of other families, steps that they can take to create their own housing opportunities.
I will say that I'm not aware of any situations where, first of all, we really don't own CRSs. We just rent them. A CRS is just a rental unit. Unless knows about one that we bought. I don't know. I don't think we buy CRSs. And this is an interesting thing. You asked me a question that I'm going to try to be careful about how I answer, because I was a resource manager for DDS and I did group home development. And what I would tell you about, I'm here talking to you about a unit, an apartment. So I am talking about a physical building. But in terms of like a house where you would house people, that cost would be the lowest cost you could imagine compared to service costs to support people in that setting over time if people needed services. So like a standard group home might cost $300 or $400 to develop, but it might cost $600,000 a year to operate, right? And so you can see like that eclipses so quickly. I think the sustainability on the support side is something that really needs to be looked at. And that's where I think some of the things we're trying to learn here around how assistive technology can be leveraged. Like, how can you use tools that will help you blend supports together? Blending supports together is incredibly hard. Like, you have your paid support and your natural support, and how do those things mesh to create a safety net over you that you can afford, your family can afford it, they're pitching in. It's a mix of things. I think we're trying to figure out how technology can help with that, and how living collectively can help with that, and being part of a community in that type of environment. But I would hesitate personally to offer too many suggestions. It's just not an area of expertise that I have around the individual home ownership. I know it's such a big issue, and it's something that when I was more involved in earlier involved in housing before I transitioned to work in this area about supportive housing, I was very interested in that model of home ownership. We just hit a lot of brick walls with it. Like, I didn't find a path forward. I know that USAID had offered a really great home training several years ago around home ownership, resources for people with disabilities and how to access them. But yeah, I think that we're going to see new models emerge. I don't know what they are. So I don't want to speak to that too much, but I understand that that's a major concern that folks are working towards, that families are working on, especially without supports from DDS maybe available. They're looking to do things on their own and looking for ways to leverage resources if they can.
Great. And no, I appreciate that response. And it's, been the brick wall has been my experience as well. But I think, just leveraging the Regional Advisory Council, maybe to build on the conversation, we can put together a sort of informal task force of sorts that could bring together various stakeholders, yourself, perhaps people relative to assistive technology, and have a roundtable conversation where we really agree upon what the issues are, and then perhaps can come up with some creative, maybe even private funding sources that can help to alleviate some of the issues. Because truly, I think that the problem that I find with clients often is one of sustainability. And housing, when you own a house and the mortgage is paid off, families feel so much more secure, in my experience, than apartment living, especially knowing, okay, I have a succession plan in place. So I think it really is an area that we could work together to explore, if that's something you think that yourself and others would be open to working on together.
Yeah, I definitely think there may be people at DDS who would be interested in working on that. I think I might not be the right match for that because I'm really narrowly applied to these housing tax credit developments.
Mm-hmm.
But I would certainly be willing to offer my ideas and participate in a discussion with, with the group. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, I know we are short on time. I don't know if a hand that is raised is new or old. Okay, yes. Go ahead. I know we have one more question, and then Josh, if you would also just share your perhaps your email so that we know how to get in touch with you for additional questions.
Would you mind just channeling your questions through Elisa or Claudia? But I will share my email. I'm happy
sure.
to do that. But I would also ask that they be channeled through, just so I can get everything in one place, and I can also, get the responses back.
Sure. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Yeah, and I apologize. I need to jump off. I'm sorry. I missed. Okay, go ahead. I know.
I am so, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, very cool. I, along with many parents whose young adults are in their 30s, who have been on the waiting list since they were 17, we're just getting to a point, at least I can speak for myself, I am so frustrated. I'm beyond frustrated. We're at a point in our family where we are going to purchase a condominium for our daughter because there's nothing else that I can do. In terms of funding, we have outside funding. We have CFC funding. So in terms of her support, I'm hopeful that she'll continue to get that. My questions come more on what are we entitled to help her? Because, this is my retirement that I'm using to buy her a condo.
Yeah.
How can I help fund this? Who do I speak to?
No, I understand. I don't work in that area in DDS, so I do the data analytics for DDS, and I help develop supportive housing units. So I can't answer that for you, but what I can say is I feel your frustration. I appreciate you asking the question. I report on the waiting list, so I know what you're talking about. And I think that there should be funding for people that are on the waiting list. That's what I think. I'm really sorry.
I know,
I'm really
Josh,
sorry. I do have to jump off. I have a 7 p.m. meeting. And I'm so sorry to have to go on that note because I feel like that was an important thing that you said. And I wanted to acknowledge it. I'm sorry I have to jump off so quickly after that. But I definitely would like it if we could get the waiting list funded. Thanks.
Thank you.
And so I know we're at the 7 o'clock mark, and Bonnie, I know your hand is up, but let me just say that I have heard the feedback from this group. This is, many of you participated in the Seeds of Change discussions, similar feedback, and I am having conversations. There's no new funding, and so we really need to shift the way we utilize our funding so that we can provide more services to more people. And so some of the things that we're talking about are really and if you look at the 5-year plan, you'll see the same thing. to utilize our resources to impact positively as many people as possible. And so that means not over supporting people, which we do in some cases, making sure that the supports are right for the person and that we're using the resources to impact as many people as possible. And so the conversations are happening, Kim, and I hear your frustration as well. And we know we need to shift so that it's not an emergency-based funding mechanism, that we can be more proactive. And that's the direction we're moving in. A lot of these things that we're talking about are designed to help with that shift. And I know, Bonnie, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just going to share because I have a disabled brother who's in and the house is in a trust. And there are HUD, our Housing and Urban Development, the Community Block Grant Program. There is, if one qualifies, can get, I say support or aid, such as a live-in aid of unrelated activities, and especially if they're low, and they have to qualify based on income. So if there's no income or the income is low, I would really talk to the town, your town's community block development program person for HUD and say you would like access to those funds and you want to apply to that program. So it's not well advertised. Unfortunately, I don't qualify with my brother because my income is considered and I'm living with him as a caregiver and they don't acknowledge that. So that's really an obstacle. I'm still charging away because I know there's a legal loophole in there. And if I get in to talk to my congressman, I'm like, this is ridiculous. I mean, I'm there because I need to be there. And I know I'm not alone. There's many families in this situation. So I would really encourage you to talk to your town community block grant program person and then talk to the state where the state office of HUD, the federal HUD in Hartford, because I do know that's available and other states are using it. So don't know why Connecticut doesn't do it, but it's being done in other states. So that's all I wanted to share.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. That's really valuable. All right, so I know we are at our time past 7 o'clock. So thank you, everybody. I think this was a fantastic meeting. Thank you, Elisa, for arranging such wonderful speakers. And certainly, I think some of these topics we can bring up next meeting, depending on who's present and what where the conversation takes us. I think housing is really critical, and we kind of only just broach the beginning of it, but I think it would be worthwhile to dedicate some additional time to, because there is, as a group, a formal group within DDS. I really think that this can be something that we see through a little bit further. So with that said, thank you so much, everybody, and we will see you next month.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.